In this lecture, we will introduce some additional functions we can use in Visual Basic. The first function we'll take a look at is the input box function. The input box function just simply creates a new dialog box which gives us a prompt, and it's really just asking the user to input text or click some button. So in other programming languages, we would have like some print statement that asks the user to enter something and then they would type it in. This is the equivalent of that, except we pop up a dialog box and then we ask the user to enter something, and then we would have them enter some text or click a button. This function will return a string and it'll contain the contents of the text box of whatever the user typed. So you don't have to actually create a text box. This function will automatically do that for you. It'll display a prompt, it'll give a text box, and then a button to click on. The format of this function is pretty straightforward. We just have input box, which is the name of the function, a pair of parentheses, and then we have a prompt and a title. Now these values are what we call arguments. They get passed to the function, and then here we can put whatever we want as long as the prompt is some string that contains the prompt of our input. The idea with the prompt is that we want to tell the user what it is to enter. If we didn't have a prompt, the user just sees like this blank text box and goes, what do I put here? So we do want to include a string that tells the user what to enter. Now the title it's an optional one. The second argument is an optional one, but this gives us a title for the dialog box that opens up. So if you want to include a title for the dialog box, you can go for it. You could omit it and just pass the prompt as an argument for this function. Let's take a look at a simple example of the input box function. So here's some code where we have a string called myString, and then we have an input box where the prompt is going to be enter your name, and then we just give a title for enter name. And then we're going to take that result, whatever the user types and clicks OK, that's going to get stored in myString, and then we're going to store that in the text field for label LB1. So what this function is going to do is it will display a dialog box. In fact, it's going to look something like this. So this would pop up on your screen. So you'd see that it says enter your name as the prompt. There's a text box to actually type in stuff, and you can click on OK or cancel. So what would happen is you enter some text, and then when you click OK, the text that's entered would be stored in the label, which means that label's being displayed in some form, so you would actually see that text appear in the form wherever that label is. Now, what if we click cancel? If we did that, it would actually display the form, but there would be no label associated with it. Because what happens is initially the lb1.text property is going to contain the empty string. So you get a pop-up box that asks you to enter like a name here. You type it in, click OK. That would appear in the label portion of your form. If you were to click cancel, then nothing would be displayed on the form in that label spot. The prompt and title arguments are not the only arguments we can have in the input box function. There are actually several different arguments we can have. So I want to take a minute and go over all the different arguments that are available for this function. So of course we have the prompt argument. This is a string, and this is the message that's displayed in our input box that would tell the user what to enter. This is the only argument that is required. All the other ones are optional. We have the title argument, which we've already mentioned before. It's a string, and this would be what's displayed on the title bar. Now, if you choose to leave this blank, since it is an optional argument, we have the empty string by default. So if we didn't put anything in this argument, nothing will be displayed in the bar. But if you do want to include some text there, you would put in a string for this argument. The next argument is what we call the default response. This is also a string. And this is simply the default response if no other input is provided. This is also initially the empty string. So what would happen is when you first open up the box, if you have any text for this argument, this would actually show up initially. So you can kind of preload a string into the text box. And if you were just to click OK and not enter anything in the box, this is what would actually get sent as the return string value. We also have an argument called xposition, although it's spelled xpos, we call it xposition. This is an integer. And what this does is it gives us the distance of the left edge of the dialog box from the perspective of the left edge of the screen. So what we're saying here is how many pixels from the left side of the screen does the text box get, I shouldn't say text box, the input box gets displayed. So we're just saying how far from the right does our input box move from the left. So it's just giving us kind of a position for the horizontal position of where to put the input box. So if we have an X position, then we also have a Y position. So this is telling us how far from the top of the screen in terms of the number of pixels. I guess I should mention that for both X position and Y position, these values would be the exact number of pixels. But how far off from the top of the screen does the input box get displayed? Now we should mention that if both the X position and Y position arguments are omitted, because they're still optional, then the default setting would be to put the box in the center of the screen. So if you want it to be in the center of the screen, you don't need to specify any values. If you want these boxes or the box to appear somewhere else, then you would have to specify the X position and Y position. Let's do some very quick, simple examples just to show you how we can use these different arguments. So let's say we have the following code. So we have a string, which we're going to call myString, and we have our input box. Notice our prompt says enter your name, and then the title is going to be enter name, and then our default response is going to be anonymous. So what this function is going to do is it'll still display the dialog box. The prompt is going to ask the user to enter the name. The title bar is going to say enter name. But what this anonymous argument is going to do is it will automatically appear in the text box. This is our default response. So if we were to just click OK and not do anything, then anonymous would get stored in myString, and that's what would appear in our label. Of course, you can go into the text box, you can take out the anonymous and put in whatever text you want. We'll do another example. So here is some more code. It's pretty much the same thing as before. We have a string, our input box has the prompt enter your name, then our name of the box is going to be enter name. We have anonymous, which is our default response, but now we've included values for X position and Y position. So our dialog box is still going to have anonymous as our default response, so we still get our dialog box to appear. Anonymous appears in our text, but what this is saying is X position is now set to 100 and Y position is set to 0. This means that our dialog box is now going to appear at the very top of the screen, because the 0 means that we're moving 0 pixels down from the top of the screen. So we're just going to be right at the very top. And then we're going to have this box also appear 100 pixels from the left of the screen. We'll do one more example. So here's some code. And what we've done is added some variables for the X position and Y position. So we see here that X position is going to be an integer that's initially 100, and Y position is another integer which initially has 200. So then we call the input box function. The prompt is enter your name. The title of the box is going to be enter name. The default response is anonymous, so that would still appear in the text box by default. And then we pass the values of X position and Y position into the function. So what this is going to do is we'll have our dialog box appear, except now it's going to appear 100 pixels from the left, which is what we had in the last example, but it's 100 pixels from the left, but it's also going to be 200 pixels down from the top of the screen.